a British colony. And that's why it is such a global city, such an international city, because of its 150 years history as a British colony. And then since 1997, Britain handed Hong Kong over to China, PRC. And so it has been under Chinese rule since 1997. So this is a absolute basic to bear in mind. In recent years, together with Xinjiang, Hong Kong has become a flashpoint of conflict between the US, the West, and China. And as we speak, there has been new sanctions imposed by the US government on Hong Kong government and China, which is, well, Hong Kong government, basically you should understand it as part of Chinese government. Chinese government appoints hand-picked people to run Hong Kong. So the United States have been imposing sanctions after sanctions against Hong Kong and Chinese officials that they are accused of violating human rights in Hong Kong. And that is the reason why I like to discuss Xinjiang together with Hong Kong, because in Western eyes, these two places are where Chinese violation of human rights are so egregious that they want the world to know that no matter how capitalist maybe China has become, on some fundamental issues or values, China doesn't belong to the international community. And so I'll show you, and you can judge. Since we've been talking about human rights in China, remember one of the points that the Chinese government have proposed, and many of you seem to agree, is this idea that, well, yes, well, there are human rights and human rights, but maybe we should consider a country's level of development. If it is a very underdeveloped poor country as opposed to a wealthy country like the United States, then we may consider different standards, maybe reasonable, maybe applicable, depending on the level of development. And many of you agree, right, to various extent that this is, so I connected this guy, and I want to show this guy. It used to work, but it's kind of loose, I don't know. Okay, so this idea of relativism, developmentalism seems to hold some water, and some of you kind of, were persuaded by it. In the case of Hong Kong, that argument doesn't work, because Hong Kong is one of the most affluent, most developed economy in the world, under Chinese rule, or anywhere compared to any country. So in terms of development, it has reached an advanced level. So if the Chinese are to practice its own principle, then Hong Kong should be eligible to enjoy the human rights that the rest of the world has access to, and not just be satisfied with having food and basic needs and all that. But still, when Hong Kong people, as I will explain in a minute, in the past 20 years since returning to Chinese rule, make demands for civil liberty, for election, for universal suffrage, China has cracked down. So I think Hong Kong is a place where you can say and you can criticize China for not really realizing what it preaches. That is, this city under your rule has reached a high level of development, but still you're not giving people there the right to some of the basic elements of a modern life. How many people, you understand what is universal suffrage, right? What is universal suffrage? Anyone? Okay, what is universal suffrage? Yes?
Everybody votes.
Yeah, everybody has the equal right to vote. One person, one vote. That's the basic idea. Vote for what? To choose the leader of the place. No matter how wealthy Hong Kong people are, for 188 years since its existence, up to today, people in Hong Kong don't have universal suffrage. I spent years in Zambia studying miners and African politics. The Zambian miners may be the poorest in the world, but they still have universal suffrage, meaning that they have one person, one vote, to vote in and to choose their own leaders. Not for one day in the history of Hong Kong since its beginning to today do people have that basic right to choose their own leader. And that is the absurdity of Hong Kong's situation. And when people decided that enough is enough, in 2019, there was a sustained protest political movement by ordinary citizens in 2019 for 6 months. And I'm going to show you some dramatic pictures. For 6 months, every day, every weekend, people would be on the street fighting the police because the government, under the order of Beijing, was not allowing this kind of protest, and they tried to suppress people's demand for universal suffrage and investigation into police violence. Police violence that we've seen only for several hours on campus several weeks ago, that had continued in the case of Hong Kong for 6 months until the police really cracked down hard and people stopped going to the street and turned to other means of resistance. But this is the kind of background, the kind of events that have happened in Hong Kong that have triggered the West objection to Chinese policies in this territory. Now the West is not totally innocent. They were not just, oh, you guys violate human rights and so on principle we have to object to China. No. The West cares a lot about Hong Kong and not so much about like Chile and Egypt and all these other protest movements around the world, because Hong Kong is a place where Western capital has invested tremendous amount for not just a few years, but for the whole entire post-war, post-World War II period. So that's why Hong Kong is so wealthy, because there's a lot of foreign investment, a huge and very vibrant expatriate community. Actually, Netflix has just a recent series called The Expat, and you can get a glimpse of expats live from that Netflix series, and it was starred by Nicole Kidman. So it's a very interesting, unique society, and in recent years have been in the spotlight of international news because of human rights violation by China. For me, for us in this class, I want to talk to you about it for 2 reasons. One is I want to use Hong Kong as a case to sort of sum up what we have discussed in this class, the kind of power strategies China has used to go global and become a global power. All the strategies that we have discussed in this class, they apply to Hong Kong in the past 25 years, since 1997. And we also discuss China does not always has its way when it tries to project its power abroad. And in the case of Hong Kong, exactly tremendous resistance to the idea and the practice of global China. Hong Kong is the paradigmatic case for me, for us to understand both how China wants and has been using its power and does not get what it wants, and instead has triggered a lot of resistance to push back at global China. So this is one first reason for me to use it to sum up the class, in addition to introducing to you the second point, which is the point about contradiction. Can China actually become a global power when it cannot tolerate one of its cities within its territory to be a global city where people have global aspiration, meaning that they want things that other people in the other parts of the world want? Can China truly become global if it cannot allow its citizens to demand and aspire to be global citizens, meaning living by the norms of the global community? And Hong Kong is such a case that make us really wonder well, yes, China, you can have all the investment in the world and you can acquire all the mines in Africa. But does that make you a global power? If you don't allow your own people, your regime cannot accommodate some of the basic fundamental human community and societal institutions that the rest of the world think of as basic and part of modernity. And Hong Kong is such a test case for China. Can China live with a Hong Kong that is very internationalized, westernized, and globalized? If it cannot, if it can only kill Hong Kong, then I think Beijing has to wonder and think twice. Can you really become a global country? Can you become a global power if you cannot accept what some of the global norms that Hong Kong people have lived and aspired to? Okay, I'm not getting any images, so I don't know what to do. Is it going to come up soon?
So there's a disconnect between the media cabinet and the actual projector. So we're bringing in actual smaller projectors to set up here so that one's not working right now. We're gonna have to come at a later date to fix it. So we're bringing another temporary current in right now. They're on the way.
Okay, that I can show this, right?
Yeah. So they're gonna bring up a smaller one. They'll wheel it up and they'll set it up to where it projects.
I can't connect this to that.
It's that. So that won't.
That one doesn't work.
That's not working. Yeah.
So there's no recording either. I don't know the recording.
Camera, it's usually the one on the far right, so that one hasn't been going on. Are you setting up on Zoom right now?
No. But people who can't come, they will rely on the recording.
Oh, yeah. There's no Zoom in the. I guess that's a different department, so I don't know. I think the white ones to the left is recording.
Okay, good.
But yeah, the Zoom will.
Okay, well then, we have to go analog. There is no PowerPoint. That shouldn't stop us from learning. Okay, I'm going to look at my PowerPoint as notes so that, and you have the PowerPoints later. It's just for me. Okay, so, actually, imagine a map. There is a map on here, and, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So imagine a map. Remember Xinjiang's location? Which part of China is Xinjiang located? Northwest, yes. So imagine this diagonal coming down from the northwest to the southeast, and that's where Hong Kong is. Another frontier of China. Now, frontier, it is really along the coast, no? So, but Hong Kong is also a frontier in many other sense, not just geographical frontier. Hong Kong is China's economic frontier. The importance of Hong Kong for China in the reform era cannot be overstated. And many people would say that without Hong Kong as this nexus between communist China and the rest of the world, especially Western capitalism, Western countries, the entire economic reform agenda would not have been realized. So it is, first of all, the importance of Hong Kong is as an economic frontier, as the bridge between the Chinese economy and the most developed parts of Western capitalism. And how do I know? How do we know that it is a frontier? Well, Hong Kong is the place where the largest number of Chinese IPO, initial public offering. Now, if you're a public company, you want to be listed on the stock market to raise capital, you have to go to find a stock market to list your company. Where is the highest concentration? Where do you find the highest concentration of the biggest, the most profitable Chinese companies to be listed? This Hong Kong. The Hong Kong stock market has the largest concentration of these Chinese companies. Many of them are state-owned enterprises, global conglomerates. Alibaba, for instance, one of the quite well-known ones. So Hong Kong offers. Why Hong Kong? Well, because there's a lot of money in Hong Kong. Western companies also go to Hong Kong in order to prepare themselves to go into China. So this is a place where Chinese companies wanting to go abroad would want to come, and also the entire Western world who wants to do business with China would first settle down in Hong Kong, prepare the offices, recruit the best professionals in accounting, in finance, in banking, get together the capital, your engineers and everything. That's why there is such a huge expatriate community in Hong Kong. So it is really where the Chinese economy depend on for both going outside of China and also for getting people to go into China. So in that sense, Hong Kong is the economic frontier of global China. Then Hong Kong is also the political frontier of global China. Because Hong Kong itself has a very different political system. As a British colony, Britain did not give democracy to Hong Kong, but as China was going to take over, Britain initiated economic reform to introduce some form of democracy, but not universal suffrage. There was no universal suffrage even under the late colonial period before Britain handed over Hong Kong to China. So the political frontier idea is that the political system in Hong Kong is different than that in communist China. Even today, no. For a while, I can survive. So the political system is not totally democratic, but is more democratic than communist China. The Chinese Communist Party prefers to stay underground in Hong Kong. That is, there is no official CCP in Hong Kong. And they work underground. They work kind of informally. It does not want people to know that there is the party in Hong Kong, active in Hong Kong. And there is more re-election. There is no genuine universal suffrage, but there is more direct election at the local level in Hong Kong than any city in the rest of China. And also the rule of law. In Hong Kong, the rule of law, we practice common law. In China is the Chinese mainland legal system. So the basic principles of basic rights are very different. Civil liberty, rule of law are very different. Now in the recent years, after the protest, China cracked down and changed the system. But up to 2019, Hong Kong has a very distinctly westernized system. A lot of things follow the British tradition. Civil servants, press freedom, so on and so forth. So when you think about Hong Kong, it is really distinctly different from China. In that sense, Hong Kong is much closer to the political system of the West than China. That's why Hong Kong is also the frontier in a political sense that demarcate the city from the West. But demarcate Chinese is a Chinese boundary for frontier between East and West. Can people see, or is it too small?
You can't make any big, unfortunately. So if you guys can't see, you guys are gonna have to move up in the front row. Sorry about that.
Okay, but you have access to these. I'll post these. You just have to listen, maybe follow. Okay, so this is what I meant. This is the frontier here. And it's not a geographical frontier only, but also in terms of economic and politics. It is much more democratic and liberal than authoritarian China. So this is the problem for Beijing is that how can you have such a big country under authoritarianism, one-party rule, its own law that is not really convergence with the West, but this super important and wealthy city that adopts very liberal Western institutions. This is the dilemma that China has been struggling with ever since it has this international global agenda. Yeah?
So we're good. Please make sure no one touches the system. Just I don't want anyone to trip over the cable and lose my job.
Okay.
And then that should be good.
Okay, but can you, if you could help me, please,
Yeah, so I don't know
to
how-
connect, can you,
That one? Is the
Is
cable
it-
enough?
huh? Yeah, I don't know, can you? Because otherwise my computer may run out of, because I can't,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Can you,
We could do the other round. We could plug this in.
yes. Can you?
I can try and find it.
No, but you can, if you could move this, I mean, oh no, I can't.
Yeah. That's the issue.
That's very stupid design.
Yeah.
Could you help me to see if that would be not?
It's definitely not long enough, but we could move the podium over. Actually, that's gonna have the same issue. Okay, I'll just.
Oh, how about this? Does it work here? No. Is it?
Yeah, that should work, yeah. That's perfect.
There.
And then,
Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay,
Very
you
good.
you can also, let us know if there's any problems with it. Happy to help.
Thank you. All right. So, it's a frontier. It's a political frontier also because of a lot of protests happened in Hong Kong that have not been allowed in the Chinese mainland. So, what is the worry of Beijing? Is that within its own borders, Hong Kong is this city where protest is an everyday occurrence. And when mainland Chinese tourists come to Hong Kong, one of the items on the tourist itinerary is to participate in these protests because they couldn't do it on the mainland. It is an item as fantastical as interesting as going to the most expensive shopping malls in Hong Kong. So it is popular resistance that mark Hong Kong as a distinct political entity, has a distinct political culture that is different. Hong Kong is also has been considered for many years as the proving ground for compatibility, cooperation, and conflict between global China and global liberal capitalism. Hong Kong is the testing ground in the sense that it's almost a testing case. If China can peacefully coexist with Hong Kong, with all its Western institutions and lifestyle, then the world would have confidence that the world can live with a global China because China can live with Hong Kong. It is such an important test case for the rest of the world to measure, to assess how genuine China, the Chinese regime, is in embracing the world, in being part of an integrated global community. Well, now we know the verdict, and as I will explain. Now 2019, I'll put 2019 in a broader context so that you will understand 2019 is spectacular because of the whole world's media was reporting on Hong Kong as the headline news for 6 months. Can you imagine any item in the news lasting that long? The world has changed a lot in the past few years, and this has dropped out of the spotlight. But 2019, it was so important because so much money, as a financial center of the whole world, world economy, people care about Hong Kong not because of the people, I don't think. They care about Hong Kong because of the huge amount of capital that has sunk into the city on the way to China. And they're just the largest concentration of corporate headquarters. It is more dense than New York in terms of corporate headquarters. And per capita income is unparalleled. So 2019 was the spotlight, and I just want to show you some images about how huge the protest was. It was against a bill by the Hong Kong government to allow criminals to be sent for trial in mainland. And this bill scared everybody in Hong Kong because everyone, Hong Kong citizen or foreign visitors passing through the city, would be vulnerable, susceptible to arrest that would send them to the mainland legal system for trial. And we all know the difference between a communist legal system and a common law system. And so this triggered so much anxiety and fear. The billionaire, the most well-known billionaires in Hong Kong, and the poorest people, they all came out to protest. And June 16, 2019 was the largest protest that the city has ever recorded in its history. How many people came out? This was the daytime, they marched, and this was the nighttime. It was almost never ending because there were so many people. 2 million people came out to the street to march, to protest their opposition against this extradition law. And what is the proportion of protesters versus the entire population? 2 million people out of 7.5 million, and that translates to 26%. That is 1 in 4, citizens came out to protest. And in the chronicle of protest in the world, in human history, there has never been more higher percentage of people from any single population to participate in one single protest. And that was a historic march. Who were in the front line, and it was just one day in a 6-month-long movement. In the front line were the young people, like you. They were of the same age group, and this guy, some of them, I happened to be in Hong Kong in those 2 years, 2019, and I saw people as young as this guy, like little kids. They were not even teenagers, and they were so angry about this law and so fearful for their own future that they put on all the gears to fight riot police, rubber bullets, and later on live ammunition, tear gas. Everybody had tear gas experience. And tear gas has a very lasting influence in your body. Some of the women frontline fighters that I interviewed, she said she didn't know, but after inhaling so much tear gas, your whole body was messed up. She stopped having periods after several months of inhaling these tear gas. And some people have forever have a coughing fits. Even today, some of the, if you were there, you just have, and your skin. Tear gas is a very lethal, non-lethal weapon. It's a very long-lasting, have a terrible physiological impact. But anyway, this is like every day. I'm not like, it's not 1 or 2 days, it's not just a march. And these youngsters have huge public support. I want to show you, this woman is a middle-aged woman. And surveys have found, and eyewitness report have found that even middle-aged housewives, they were part of the protest crowd, and they were helping to extinguish tear gas with water bottle. Everybody going out to the street in those years, they carry something to help the movement. Carrying water bottle is the easiest way because you can pour and then extinguish. And sometimes they would try to protect the young by banding together and talk to the police, shouting back at the police so that you block the police from advancing. I was part of the group organized by one of the churches with elderly people like myself, who would just put ourselves in front of the riot police to stop them, like a human wall, human shield, so that those frontline youth could have 1 or 2, 3 more seconds to escape, because they were running after them with really batons and every possible weapons. And this is an elderly rally to support the young. So the idea is that this is not just a youth movement, it was really a popular uprising from everyone. It's on the street, whatever you can dismantle from the street, you use as protective, to protect yourself, to put distance against the police, and this is what they have dug out from the benches. And then this is on one of the university campuses where it's a war zone. Journalists who cover Hong Kong during those days actually say that they felt like they were in a war zone. They felt like all of them have become war photographers or war journalists. It's real. And they were just firing firing everything at the students. And this is like in the downtown central business district, where office workers, professionals, accountants, I was doing my research on the movement, so I've been part of this lunch with you. It's called Lunch with You rallies. There's only 1 hour of lunchtime in the most expensive central business areas. And these guys sacrifice their one hour lunch to come to stage a protest to express their discontent against the law, but also against the entire Chinese government policies towards Hong Kong for the past 20-some years. It's not just 1 year. So it's like just collective explosion. Police violence. Now, when I saw that last month when they hit on the students, 2019 came back to my mind because I saw that every day in Hong Kong. And they were beating up people, and this showed that the policeman was pointing is a real gun. That guy survived. I don't know how he could survive, but all the internal organs were shot through by this guy, and it was really bloody. It's like a Tiananmen. By the way, June 4th is today. It's Tiananmen's 35th anniversary today. But you can see this is real battle. The regime was killing people, or trying to. There were women, many young women among the protesters. And it's not just a regular arrest. I've seen with I'm the eyewitness to many of these. When they arrest you, they took off your gear. And what did they do? They didn't just arrest you. They would force your head against the concrete ground and just rub your face against it. And there was so much blood came out of protesters' faces. Some of them were captured by a camera. You can find those pictures. But that is the kind of brutality. It's not just arrest rioters, let's say. It's also this hatred by the police against these young people. Otherwise, they wouldn't. They'd have no need to. And you know those scars it would take a long time if they ever will come off. Because your face, once they grind it, the scars are horrible, and it's full, and it's everywhere. So, police violence, and this is why the West was so horrified by what they saw in Hong Kong against these young people, by peaceful protesters. At the beginning, they were all peaceful. It was the police that inflicted violence and then triggered the cycle of violence. Violence begets violence. And the protesters upgraded their gear. I still remember that at the beginning, I didn't have any gear. I was just using this mask, that surgical mask that we use in COVID. But there's no use against these tear gas. And everybody tried to upgrade until a point I had a full face mask made in Japan that with very good filters. And some of the more radical people, they had to import through some illegal channel. Import Israeli made, really Israel, made by Israel, used by Israeli military. That those would be totally tight, sealed tight, and they could fight for a long time in the front line. They would also have bullet-proof vests from Germany. Those young kids, I don't know where, but they found ways to import all of these professional gear in order to fight the police. So it was a very determined rebellion by the city, very iconic look, these ninja-like young people. They were fearless. And after 6 months of that, 6 months of such popular rebellion and uprising, Beijing said enough is enough, and it imposed the national security law. Basically now, as we speak, national security law plus a recently enacted local version of the national security law imposed by Beijing. Basically, even without saying a word, like yesterday was June 4th in Hong Kong, in Asia, because of the time difference, and some citizens tried to mark that day. There's an old guy trying to just by himself, no collective action, just walk near where usually people gather for 35 years in Hong Kong, the vigil. And he was going towards that park by himself, holding a candle, nothing, he didn't say anything. And he was using his hand, his finger, to write in the air, 6, 4, 3, 5. June 4th, 35 years. He was arrested immediately. This is the severity of a security law. You wear a t-shirt, another woman I saw in the news, with the same character, 643935, was arrested. So this is this national security law designed to crush any form of dissent, whether it is personal, individual, or collective. There's no more protest in Hong Kong. So this is the kind of situation we're dealing with. And this is the kind of violation of human rights that the West has been objecting since 2019. It's a human rights issue, and many in China see that as a domestic political issue, and saying that the West has no right to interfere, the West has no right to criticize, because Hong Kong is a Chinese city. Britain returned Hong Kong to China. And so China say, hey, why are you, the West, criticizing us, interfering with our domestic policy? To the West, it is a human rights policy. Now for us, as I said, I want to use it to show you as an instance, Hong Kong as an instance of global China's power and influence, but also people's pushback at global China. And I will discuss in a little bit how China's policy towards Hong Kong illustrate the limits or the contradiction of Beijing's global China project. China wants to be a global power, but it cannot accept many of the global norms that people around the world have taken for granted and assumed as normative. Normative in the sense of being normal, but also as being correct. So can China be a global power? This is the questions that Hong Kong raises for us. So Hong Kong what is Hong Kong? I'll just very quickly give you the background. As I said, from 1842 to 1997, Hong Kong was a British colony. And the paradox of that is when Britain left Hong Kong in 1997, Hong Kong's per capita income was actually higher than that of Britain. And that is rare for a colony to be more developed than the metropole, or the colonizer, so to speak. So it was returned in 1997. I don't want to bore you with the details of why there was a return. But on receiving back Hong Kong, China promised what? China promised Hong Kong people and the West, because of the huge investment the West has made in Hong Kong, the West will freak out if all the investment come under the rule of a communist regime. So as a way to pacify the West and all the money that come to Hong Kong, and as well as the Hong Kong people, China promised what they call one country, two systems. That is, we are one country, you're all Chinese now, but we give you the autonomy to run your own system. That's why two systems. On the mainland is communist system, and then Hong Kong remain the system that it has always has, which is the British common law system, promised to us moving towards democracy, more elections, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and so religion, so on and so forth. Hong Kong has its own currency, its own budget, its own cultural identity, and the media, supposedly everything should remain the same. It is officially a semi-autonomous region under Chinese rule. The army, though, the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, has a barrack inside Hong Kong that they stay underground. I've never seen any soldier walking around the street in Hong Kong because they didn't want to scare foreign international investors and visitors. So anyway, so it was promised one country, two system. As I said, the paradox, the irony is that it's the freest economy in the world, one of the highest, most expensive and wealthiest in the world, but people have no universal suffrage. Okay, now, as I said, for this class I want to convey to you that Hong Kong, what has happened to Hong Kong has been part of global China. Remember this power strategies that we discussed so much throughout the course? All of them you can find in Hong Kong. And that is why Hong Kong people were compelled to reject not just that one law in 2019, but they were resisting 20-some years of global China power, as we have discussed throughout the course. And so it's multiple strategies acting on Hong Kong, trying to dominate Hong Kong. Remember these 3 plus, of course, transnational repression, but in Hong Kong we saw that, of course. But at least some of these major methods. I'm going to go through them very quickly so that you get a sense of why 2019 was such an explosion of discontent. And then I'll play a clip, 10 minutes clip, that brings things together about 2019 and why 2019 is just the peak of that 20-year struggle by Hong Kong against China. But why are people? What are people struggling against, right? So these are the things that China has been doing in Hong Kong that trigger popular resistance. Economic statecraft. Remember we talked about exporting China's construction overcapacity, all the building materials, and these contractors looking for projects around the world. That's why they build so many infrastructure in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, part of the Belt and Road. Well, Hong Kong also is a target of these exports of overcapacity. We call them white elephant projects. They're huge mega projects, no use. They will never make profit. But China wanted to export its overcapacity in order for its own state-owned enterprises to make money. So it imposed on Hong Kong absolutely useless, unnecessary, but hugely expensive. This bridge and this so-called high-speed rail connecting Hong Kong with China, we already have many rails connecting the city with the Chinese mainland. There's absolutely no need for this rail. And this bridge is the most expensive above water bridge per kilometer in the world. It is the longest also. And this is also the most expensive. Anyway, you get the idea. Whose money is used to build these? Of course, not Beijing's money. They didn't give loans to Hong Kong because Hong Kong is so wealthy. They just go to get from Hong Kong's treasury. So it's all paid for by Hong Kong citizens as taxpayers. And that's why people are so angry at China. It's not just that they deny them the right to choose the leader of Hong Kong, but also economically. This is outright theft, basically. You come and say, you have no choice but to build this hugely, the most expensive express rail the world have ever seen, the longest above water bridge the world has ever seen, using your own money. Will you be angry if you were taxpayers? Now I show you this. This is, it didn't exist when I was in Hong Kong many years ago. It was totally brand new. The land was from reclamation, another world-leading industry China has found itself in. Totally brand new. The land is reclamation from sand, basically built. And so I've shown you many pictures of this kind around the world, and of course China, Hong Kong has that kind of newly built port. These infrastructure, you have to ask who benefits, right? And these are the details that show you the cost to Hong Kong is not just the budget, the budgetary burden. It was such a long and big project that the price tag kept expanding and increasing, as most of the contractors were from China, and there were many deaths, 19 deaths, 600 injuries while building it. And then that area where the infrastructure was built was actually the natural habitat of white dolphins. And so a lot of environmentalists came out to protest. But why China wants to build it? Because it symbolized the integration of Hong Kong to the mainland. The bridge that I told you about, the above water bridge, is a huge project linking Hong Kong with the mainland. Along the way, the project involves building artificial islands. It's a just monumental engineering project. And when it opened, the Chinese official press celebrated the opening by saying what? By saying that this bridge has set the world standard, engineering standard for this kind of project. And that China has been receiving a lot of contracts, demands from Germany and other Western countries to build a similar bridge. So again, remember I told you one of the ambitions of China is to set world standards in as many things as possible. Engineering standards is what it has achieved, and that's why it celebrates. Using Hong Kong's project to set engineering standard and to attract more buyers, contractors. The second power mechanism that we discussed, China uses around the world, but also, as I'm saying here in Hong Kong, is patron clientelism, United Front, co-opting the elite, grooming pro-China political leaders to plant these people in Hong Kong's political system so that they can sway citizens to elect pro-China politicians into the system. The grassroots, not just the elite, co-optation, patron clientelism also is applied to the grassroots. A lot of voluntary associations in Hong Kong, like overseas voluntary associations in Chinatowns around the world, they are the targets of Chinese sponsorship, exchanging money, material reward for political support of China. And that has happened in every neighborhood in Hong Kong, that they send a lot of gifts, a lot of service providers representing China to tell Hong Kong citizens, especially the poorer citizens, the poorer segment of the population, that we, Beijing representatives, are here to care about you, the elderly, you know. And so when it comes election times, there'll be support for pro-China candidates and for the Chinese regime in general. The third mechanism we talked about, symbolic domination, which is about the control of media and the news and everyday common sense. The publishing industry, all of these, bookstores, all of these are about symbols. And we understand the world through symbols, through news. And China has a big, big presence and penetration into Hong Kong's media, education, school textbook history, rewriting Hong Kong's history. I want to give you one example. It should stick in your head, to what extent the Chinese government is rewriting the history books in Hong Kong. The latest, and is now in Hong Kong school children's history textbook. We're talking about primary school history textbook. There is a line, and is widely reported. In those textbook, history says Hong Kong has never been a colony. This is what the youngest generation of Hong Kong citizens are learning from the history curriculum. I just began this class by telling you that Hong Kong has been for 150 years a British colony. Now, this is a truth, a fact that you look in any history book will tell you. But now it's being rewritten. 20 years from now, 50 years from now, school children learning history about Hong Kong in Hong Kong would not know that Hong Kong has been a British colony. So all these together actually for Hong Kong people, it felt as if after British colonization, there is Chinese colonization. And this is absolutely crucial for you to understand why so many people came out to the street in 2019. 1997, Hong Kong people and the whole world announced the end of British colonization in this city, handed over to China. Well, what happened after that? What happened after that for the people in Hong Kong was that they felt like they were recolonized, not by Britain this time, but by China, because of all the things I just told you, both economics, but also in terms of penetration in neighborhoods to sway political election results, as well as in culture. Your textbook, your media. Media control has been pervasive, and the content of the media has been very much censored. Well, these are just elaboration of the idea that Hong Kong has entered another colonial period after 1997, and I want to, well, these you can read on the effect. So what? Then the response was because it was experienced as a colonization all over again by China. That's why since 2003 and all the way to 2019, year after year, there have been protests. And protests against different things, but basically we could understand overall this whole movement, this whole 20 period under Chinese rule, we have seen protests one after another, and it all amount to resistance to China as a colonial power. And this, if you raise this flag or this banner in Hong Kong, I'm sure within 1 minute you'll be arrested. Now, don't ever try to do or say anything or write anything like this, not in your Facebook even. Oh, maybe you don't use Facebook. What do you use now? Whatever you use, don't put this up, because, and people have got arrested. A student who spent time in Japan, a Hong Kong student who went to Japan to study, and she wrote something like this along this line on her Facebook like several years ago, when after she finished her studies in Japan and returned to Hong Kong, she was arrested. But this is for the young generation, this is a fact, and this is why they are so passionate about the protest in 2019. So, when you look at Hong Kong, you see how China tries to deploy its power strategies around the world, but also in Hong Kong. But in Hong Kong, you also see the resistance, the pushback that we've been talking about around the world against global China. So China does not always get the power that it wants. We have to see how people react to China. And in Hong Kong, this is particularly dramatic and powerful because for Hong Kong people, China was experienced. For a lot of Hong Kong people, I didn't say every single one, there are people who are still very much pro-China. For historical reasons, because we share the Chinese cultural heritage. And so when China say you should love us because you are also Chinese, that kind of rhetoric sway a lot of people and trigger a sense of ancestry affiliation to the Chinese regime. But as I said from the very beginning of this course, the Chinese regime, Chinese culture, Chinese people, the Communist Party, they're all different entities that we should not mix them up. Although the political elite always wants you to conflate them because it helped them. Conflating these categories help them to secure their rule. Okay, so you see, so you now understand 2019, which is the latest, the last of a 2-decade-long resistance against China. So I want to, before we break, I want to play you a very good clip about, or 2 clips, but if you want to understand this period, there is a Netflix documentary that I highly recommend. It's very entertaining because it's Netflix, and but it really showcases the situation in Hong Kong and the younger generation, which is of your age, by looking particularly at one very famous young leader by the name of Joshua Wong. That Netflix documentary is called Joshua. And he is such an iconic figure. About 9 years ago, when he first emerged as the new leader of Hong Kong's movement, I invited him to UCLA twice to speak to a class like this. But now he's in jail. The last time I saw him was several months ago in court when he was for his trial, and we're waiting for sentencing. It's very likely that he will get very long sentence, and some of the older activists would get life, perhaps. Anyway, so this is a very good clip. I just want you to, if I can play, I don't know. No, it doesn't because of the system. But okay, well that means I can't play the other clip either. Yes.
I was just curious if, like, Hong Kong citizens' views towards China, like, tend to split across particular, like, economic class or ideological lines.
Very good question. He's asking whether Hong Kong citizens' view about China are splitting, are not the same, and that may split along class, socioeconomic class lines, or ideological lines. I think this is a great question. I think a split is mostly generational. That is the generation that were born right before 1997, around that time in the 90s and all the way, because they were the ones who grew up after British colonialism ended. They were explicitly told that colonialism has ended. You are the master of your own house. Hong Kong people would rule Hong Kong. There's one country but two systems. So they were the ones, like Joshua here. He was born 1997, I think, or 96, maybe a year before, around that time. And for them, Hong Kong is their only home, not China. They never have any affiliation. They didn't feel part of China. And that's why the sign that says Hong Kong is not China, it really speaks their mind. It is how they felt. And he is a superhero in many, many senses. He was just a genius in mobilizing his fellow students. When he emerged as this leader, and it's this documentary show, he was able to mobilize 20,000 people to stay in downtown Hong Kong to occupy a square. How old was he? He was 15 years old. He was 15 years old and was able to, very articulate. Before he went into prison, I tried to arrange for him to come to the US to enroll in some Ivy League programs where some of my former students now teach. And so I said, well, you need some recommendation letters. You know one of his letter writer in this room? Nancy Pelosi. Because he has been so active in the international arena, not just in Hong Kong, that he has come to know many important political leaders in the United States as well as in the world. And so he told me, oh, one of the letter writers would be Nancy Pelosi. Originally I thought I offered to write him a letter, but he doesn't need it, right? Because he has all these famous people to write for him. But anyway, it's a very entertaining documentary that gives you a sense of the period, this period we're talking about, and most importantly, why young people like Joshua Wong would reject so adamantly and so willing to sacrifice their own freedom to fight for autonomy in Hong Kong, the freedom and the right that they feel are their birthright. Because they have absolutely no other place to go. Hong Kong is their own birthplace. They were born there. And it was no longer a British colony. It was Hong Kong that is supposed to be an autonomous area. And so I think one way to understand them is to imagine that if you were Ukrainians, let's say, and Russia invaded your country, what would you do? You just fight because that's your country, that's your homeland. Well, I can't play you the other clip, but I will. It's available. I'm sorry. It's actually a very good summary of the situation there. Let me see. So it's a decolonization struggle. And all these are examples. Now you can read on your own. These are examples that every step along the way, the details of these protests. All right. Before, when they built those express rail projects, the White Elephant projects that I just mentioned, there were lots of young people protesting differently. Yes,
It looked to me like the video was working.
it's working,
Yeah.
but the sound is not. Let's see.
I thought I heard something.
You heard something? Okay,
Yeah,
it's worth trying. It's from here.
I can.
Can you hear?
In 1997, Hong Kong was handed back to the Chinese by the British. Here you have a Western-bred population being handed back to the communists.
Seems like a real David and Goliath kind of struggle.
Joshua is very passionate and he truly cares about Hong Kong and is willing to give everything for it.
What we hope to do is just demand freedom of mind and freedom of speech.
It's not Hong Kong anymore.
The future of Hong Kong should be decided by Hong Kongers.
He encouraged normal, ordinary Hong Kong people to care about Hong Kong.
It's the Joan of Arc story, right? The youngster who can see the world clearly comes into a complicated adult conflict. The sense of scale could not be larger.
I didn't realize it would be so hard. Hong Kong is the place that I born, I live, and the place that I love.
There's a moment that you thought, wow, we are gonna make history.
Joshua Wong did not do it as a particular political campaign. There was a sense of innocence that made people identify with it.
We have the responsibility to protect our hometown.
I will never stop until Hong Kong is Hong Kong again.
So it's a story of a teenager against a superpower. Highly recommend it, just because it's so relevant to our discussion here. And can it back here a little bit, maybe? No? Yeah? Okay, well, then I can play the rest.
In Hong Kong, and why the millions of protesters who filled the streets for more than 4 months say the future of their city is at stake. It's the last of our 10-part series, China, Power and Prosperity, produced with the support of the Pulitzer Center. NewsHour Foreign Affairs correspondent Nick Schifrin reports from Hong Kong.
In the shadow of downtown, Hong Kong teenagers spend their weekends denouncing their government. These students say they used to be apolitical, but now they feel they have to fight to save what makes their city unique.
In China now, all is controlled by the government. Hong Kong is not like that, right? Now, my hope is to save Hong Kong freedom.
Every protester plays a part, and 16-year-old Shum Shums is to give free hugs. She wears a mask that's now been banned by the government and provides only her nickname to hide her identity from Hong Kong authorities she accuses of persecuting protesters instead of improving people's lives.
We are teenagers, and when we grow up, then maybe the government may be more harsh, maybe there's no any freedom.
Hong Kong's Generation Z wants freedom from Beijing so much, they wrote their own national anthem. With its own music video that's gone viral. Break now the dawn, liberate our Hong Kong, they sing. United, we say this is today's revolution.
Free Hong Kong! Free Hong Kong!
This is one of Hong Kong's main thoroughfares, and protesters have completely taken it over. And they use umbrellas, not only for the sun, but also because it's the symbol of the democracy movement here. And they say that the freedoms that this city has enjoyed are being eroded.
They started protesting 6 months ago with a narrow demand: withdrawal of a bill that would allow for the extradition of criminal suspects to mainland China, where they say the judicial system is not independent.
The government will formally withdraw the bill.
Chief Administrator Carrie Lam eventually withdrew the bill, but protesters expanded their demands to include her resignation, the freeing of arrested protesters, and what many here call freedom, the ability to vote directly for their legislators without Beijing's interference. Others describe freedom more broadly and have deeper grievances. Pollsters say the number of Hong Kong residents identifying as Chinese is at its lowest level ever.
When you guys think of your identity, do you identify yourselves as both Chinese and from Hong Kong, or just Hong Kong?
Just Hong Kong. Just Hong Kong. If we give up, we're just telling to China that, Hong Kong people is just like the same in the mainland China. So we are not going to let this happen. Hong Kong is not China.
For centuries, Hong Kong was part of China, but in the 1800s, foreign powers attacked, and the British forced China to lease the city as part of what the Chinese government calls the Century of Humiliation. In 1997, the British handed the city over, and under a deal known as One Country, Two Systems, Communist China promised Hong Kong could keep its British-written laws and independent judiciary, but had to turn over its defense and foreign policy. Beijing's defenders say China has lived up to its promises, and protesters' talk of revolution is misguided.
I think they're over-worried. In Hong Kong, the rule of law, the well-entrenched common law system underlines our freedoms and rights. That's why they can have protests every day.
Regina Ip is a member of the cabinet that runs the Hong Kong government. She says One Country, Two Systems is doing just fine.
After more than 180 years of Hong Kong as a city, we have a very strong and unique culture. There's nothing wrong with a big country having different regional cultures. It's the same in the US. The Californians are very different from those from Iowa or the Texans,
The protesters argue China has not lived up to its commitments and is encroaching into every aspect of residents' lives. Professor Samson Yoon is studying the protests with the help of student pollsters.
I think this is a gradual build-up of people's discontent about how China is ruling Hong Kong, or how the Hong Kong government is not representing the local population, but more representing Beijing.
That sentiment has taken hold since pro-democracy demonstrators occupied Hong Kong streets 5 years ago, demanding universal suffrage.
No reforms have been done, and instead there has been a lot of disqualification and prosecution. So people have been angry for a period of time. It's a time bomb. And One Country, Two Systems can't stand on this, these time bombs.
Pro-democracy leader Joshua Wong has been arrested 5 times in the last 5 years. In 2015, the employees of a bookstore that sold books criticizing Beijing disappeared inside mainland China. And in 2016 and 2017, under pressure from Beijing, Hong Kong's High Court disqualified elected members of Hong Kong's local government, including the youngest ever member, 23-year-old Nathan Law.
At the end of the day, that accumulated anger, the infuriated crowd exploded in this summer and became what we have seen.
Law says he was disqualified not because of a proper ruling, but because Beijing was afraid of the younger generation's power.
I promised to my constituency that I will not obey a regime that brutally kills its people. I will keep my promise in my campaign that I will serve the people instead of the regime.
Autonomy, democracy, and rule of law has always been our core values.
Last month, Law and other pro-democracy activists urged the U.S. Congress to pass legislation that would allow the administration to sanction China for any Hong Kong crackdown. They say they need U.S. help.
We are at the stage where, we have tried all the tactics that we can on the grounds in Hong Kong, but then that's not enough to gain that traction that we need to keep this momentum going on.
Denise Ho was one of Hong Kong's biggest pop stars. Since she started protesting, Beijing removed her music from Chinese websites and banned her from performing in mainland China. She says the protest leaders are not demanding revolution, just justice.
We are at the stage where Hong Kong is in a police state, and we do not have any means whatsoever to bring justice to this situation of police violence and brutality.
On Wednesday, for the first time, police shot a protester with live ammunition, a step up from the tear gas and batons used previously. But the violence goes both ways. Back on July 1st, protesters broke into the Legislative Council. They ransacked the building, spray-painted crude messages on the walls, and briefly occupied the main chamber, the seat of Hong Kong power.
There are people within this movement who say that this was a mistake and that you needed to stay peacefully in order to make your point. What's your response to that?
We have to try all the peaceful ways. And what did the government, what was the government's response? It's nothing.
For the young people, they said that, you know, like people like me have been fighting for 30 years, 40 years, so they don't want to be like us, having to wait 40 years. And I can understand that sentiment.
Lee Chuk-yan is a union organizer and former member of the Legislative Council. He says Beijing is trying to silence Hong Kong demonstrators to prevent change in Hong Kong and prevent anyone in mainland China from making the same demands.
China is trying to destroy Hong Kong and our identity, our culture, our rule of law, our aspiration of democracy, our freedom. The Communist Party is trying to ban all human rights and freedom in China. So the only way for Hong Kong to survive, to have democracy, is that we need to fight China also. We need to change China before China changes us.
Pro-democracy protesters believe their more aggressive tactics are accelerating change, but Beijing has used the tactics to portray protesters as violent threats to stability. On Facebook, Chinese state media outlet China Daily equated the protesters to terrorists who attacked the U.S. on 9/11.
For 2 months now, the Hong Kong police have been doing their duty according to the law. Hong Kong's radical demonstrators have repeatedly attacked police officers with extremely dangerous tools. They have already committed seriously violent crimes and have begun to show signs of terrorism.
China also began threatening to use its military. Troops massed on the Hong Kong border, and the army unit already garrisoned in Hong Kong released a slick video showing soldiers practicing. But Beijing knows there's consequences to its relationship with the U.S. if the military intervened, because that's what President Trump has warned.
We're also carefully monitoring the situation in Hong Kong. The world fully expects that the Chinese government will honor its binding treaty. How China chooses to handle the situation will say a great deal about its role in the world in the future.
Chinese officials say comments like that encourage protesters to...
Okay, I think you get a sense of the Hong Kong issue, and we will continue a little bit on this and then do a review about the whole course on Thursday. Thank you. And some of you have already filled in the course evaluation online. You can continue to do that. I won't know who is saying what, but the system will know who has submitted that evaluation. Okay, so, but we'll have time to do it on Thursday as well at the end of the class. Thank you. See you on Thursday.